NASA calls off that space launch at the very last minute. Protests spread over the killing of a black man in police custody. And be careful throwing out your junk mail. It could be your stimulus payment. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Thursday, May 28th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hi, Carlo. Good morning.
Jill, how you doing over there?
Great. How are you? I was going to come up with some kind of same day or whatever.
It's early,
but I have nothing. I have nothing.
No, all good here. This week is flying by, right?
I know. Love having a 4-day week.
4-day week, man. Wave of the future.
Let's get to some news, Carlo. Yeah, you know what? You might be right about that, by the way. A lot of companies thinking about it. But, Carlo, for the first time since early March, let's start off with some non-COVID related news. NASA has called off the launch of the SpaceX rocket because of bad weather about 15 minutes before it was scheduled to lift off. The crew is going to try again on Saturday at 3:22 p.m. Eastern time. Scrubbing a launch with just minutes to go, not uncommon. And this actually has to do with a complicated set of rules based on precise weather conditions. A lot of Americans were disappointed, including us, Carlo, but I love this from NASA. If they want to just get a little perspective, they say, a good day on land is better than a bad day in space, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that's for sure. Better safe than sorry, right? It also, we talked yesterday, Jill, about how President Trump would become only the third president to witness a live space launch. He did go down there to Cape Canaveral yesterday, and he had to basically fly right back when they scrubbed it. So I guess maybe that's one of the reasons why more presidents haven't gone to these, because it's so common for them to be postponed. But that, had the window been just 10 minutes later, it would have been a go. It just had to do with like this very specific, like you said, set of circumstances at that second. Remember, they have to, these things are all timed precisely because they have to dock with the space station, right? So it has to, the space station has to be where they are, and then it's orbiting the Earth. So that's why they're waiting till Saturday. But hopefully it's a go on Saturday. So I love this story. So I'm just glad that nothing bad happened, right?
Yeah, we'll be watching Saturday. Meanwhile, though, the weather that caused the launch cancellation was part of a tropical storm that seemed to form almost out of nowhere off the coast of South Carolina. Tropical storm Bertha existed for just 6 hours. It is now a tropical depression after making landfall in Charleston.
Yeah, 6 hours. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. It was a nothing. It was just like a little, nothing burger system. Became a tropical storm. It got its name. Made landfall. It's now back to being a tropical depression. Got to respect the hustle, I guess, of just becoming strong enough to get named. That system is going to bring heavy rain, possibility of flooding from the Carolinas up to Virginia today. So be aware for that. Be aware of that if you live in the Mid-Atlantic. Miami, this thing brought 14 inches of rain yesterday to Miami. That's the heaviest rainfall in that city since 2012. And remember, I know we've said this before, but they're expecting a serious hurricane season in the Atlantic this year. So hopefully those forecasts are wrong, because I think that's the last thing anybody feels like they need right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, dealing with coronavirus and a hurricane season is just, it feels a little too daunting. Another developing story that we're following this morning for a second night in a row: protests in Minneapolis over the police killing of George Floyd turned violent. Now, Floyd is the black man. He died after a Minneapolis police officer pinned him down to the ground with his knees for 9 minutes after he was already in custody. Demonstrations that did start peacefully quickly deteriorated once again. Chopper footage showed looting of several businesses and protesters throwing bricks through the windows of the 3rd precinct where this all happened. Police say one person was killed in a shooting near the site of Floyd's arrest. They used tear gas again to try to disperse the crowds.
in a separate protest, a separate Black Lives Matter protest in Los Angeles has become another flashpoint here, something to watch. Demonstrators, it started out peacefully. Demonstrators blocked the 101 freeway in downtown LA. But again, like in Minneapolis, it sort of deteriorated. It didn't get quite as violent, but some protesters attacked California Highway Patrol police cars. So this is getting, this is getting dicey. I think a lot of people, understandably, are just really fed up,
Oh,
and
sorry about that.
well, that's all right. And calling for these officers not just to be fired, which they were almost immediately, but to face some kind of justice. So just a developing story, definitely going to be on our radar in the days to come.
Did you catch LeBron James' Instagram post? He posted, he
No.
juxtaposed two pictures, one of the Minneapolis police officer with his knee on Floyd's neck, kneeling, and then another of Colin Kaepernick kneeling. And he wrote, "This is why." And he says, "Do you understand now, or is it still blurred to you?" It's pretty powerful of an image, I have to say.
I mean, LeBron James has been very outspoken about police brutality, about all of these issues, and he's right. I mean, it's hard, people who knock Colin Kaepernick and the rest of the any athletes who take a knee, just based on these stories. Like, I don't really understand. Like, it's so obvious what they're protesting, and it's so understandable to me.
Okay, let's get to now what has been our top story every day for the past few months, COVID-19. As the U.S. coronavirus death toll passes the 100,000 milestone, the WHO is warning that countries that reopen too quickly risk seeing a second peak, and that so far there doesn't appear to be a seasonal pattern to the outbreak. South Korea already seeing signs of a second wave after reporting its biggest spike of new cases in 2 months. The question, I guess, here is if and when we get our second peak, do we have enough tracers, and do we have enough testing, and do we have the protocols in place that we can put out the little fires, as the president says, and make sure that we don't get another huge second wave, or are we going to see more of this? It's horrific.
Well, it is. We talked about the 100,000 milestone yesterday, and it came and went as we expected. Again, the president didn't mention it. There's been really no sense of, more. A lot of. I don't want to bring this back to Trump, but I'll just say one brief thing. What struck me is, like, in other instances of sort of like national tragedy, a lot of presidents, really, Democrat and Republican, have really taken on this role of, like, comforter in chief. Right? You remember, Bill Clinton with his famous speech after the Oklahoma City bombing, George W. Bush, going to Ground Zero in the days after 9/11. That was really that was a remarkable moment for a lot of people. President Trump, Barack Obama crying after Sandy Hook. I think people really want to see that from their leaders, and President Trump has made a calculus that's not part of his his presidency, really. And I think a lot of people would like to see more out of him, just in terms of marking how sad this really is. But I do want to mention one thing, Jill. I went off on a little tangent there, and I'm sorry, but I want people to pay attention to what's going on in Brazil. They're now reporting twice as many COVID deaths a day as the United States. Brazil, arguably the epicenter right now. It is the situation there is quickly spiraling out of control, and Bolsonaro, their president, he has been just awful in this. He has not taken it seriously at all. He's never worn a mask. He's like flouted the government's own guidelines, and he is paying the price. 60% of Brazilians in this new poll now support his impeachment. He is quickly losing support there. They call him the Trump of the tropics, right? He's very much a leader in the vein of Donald Trump, sort of like that populist kind of president. And like Donald Trump, his COVID response, I think, could potentially be his unraveling. So just something to watch. Also, I'm sorry to keep going, but you said one thing about the U.S. second wave. We just got to remember, like, there's still I think 13 or 14 states in America right now, their deaths are still going up, right? So
Yeah, it's
they haven't
first
even reached
wave. Yeah.
their first wave. New York, not one of those. And again, it's so regional that it's a very strange thing to report on, right? Because it's just a completely different story, state by state. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
Um, it's in Alabama right now. In some parts of Alabama, there are no ICU beds. So they're saying, so some lawmakers they're saying basically they're dealing with what right now with kind of the situation New York was in a couple of months ago.
Right.
A new study I want to quickly mention finds that up to 80% of people who get coronavirus are asymptomatic. Can you just think about that for a minute and the implications? So they figured this out by looking at data from one cruise ship that had a coronavirus outbreak, and it found 80% of the people who tested positive didn't show any symptoms of the disease, yet they still could spread it. And this is super important as we just think about reopening, as we are not even thinking about reopening, as we are reopening, and why it is so important to wear masks and practice social distancing, even if you feel okay. And it also tells you that, the whole idea of these temperature checks and a lot of what we're doing is just symbolic and really has no
Totally.
practical implications. I mean, if you have a fever, you probably don't feel great and you probably are the person who's staying home. I'm worried about the asymptomatic people who don't know it and probably don't have a fever.
Totally. And I think basically anybody in New York City thinks that they were infected with coronavirus in like February and March, just given how many people were probably asymptomatic carrying it, like on the subway and on the streets and in offices. But yeah, it's just another example, Jill. If the guidance were better in the beginning about wearing masks, I think that really would have made a difference. And I still kick myself for not taking the mask stuff seriously in the very early days of this. And I agree with you about the temperature checks. I mean, I think it's one of those things like it can't hurt. But not only does it not catch asymptomatic people, but a lot of people don't have. Not everybody's body temperature is exactly the same. I think about my mom. She got sick with just a regular cold a couple of weeks ago, and she had a fever, but she has a lower body temperature. Just normally, right? Her like resting body temperature is a couple degrees lower, so her fever wouldn't have registered as a fever in a temperature check. And I'm sure that she's not the only person like that.
That's like me. No, my natural body temperature is a lot lower. I just was laughing at you saying everyone in New York thinks that they had it. I am convinced I definitely didn't have it. So I'm like the one person, I'm not even getting an antibody test because I've said to my husband, I'm like, I was so hyped up on coronavirus,
Yeah, you
just the
are.
news starting in January when I was reading
You
about
were like the
Wuhan
bubble
being
boy from
locked down.
Seinfeld.
Yeah, that I was like literally starting then, I stopped taking the subway. I covered my face. I was stocking up on Clorox wipes. I was
Yeah.
so I'm the one person that I'm like, definitely, you know what? I definitely didn't have it.
Right.
I'm not, it's funny. A public service announcement now, though. Be careful tossing out your junk mail, especially if you have not gotten your stimulus check. About 4 million people are getting their coronavirus federal stimulus payments via prepaid Visa debit cards. The cards, though, are easy to mistake for junk. Carlo, I know you got yours, and you told me what happened. You said you were lucky you didn't throw it out, right?
So I wanted to get this in the newsletter and the podcast today because I was floored by this. So I got, I was picking up my mail yesterday, um, and 99% of, I assume this is everybody at this point, but 99% of the mail is garbage, right? It's like credit card offers and, magazines, catalogs. So one of the things I got was this, it was a plain white envelope and it came from Money Network Cardholder Services, which already sounds like a scam, right? And inside of it, you get it's a Visa debit card with an American flag on it. And it's issued by something called MetaBank, whatever that is. It doesn't tell you, it says this is your economic stimulus payment, but it doesn't have like a government logo on it. It doesn't tell you how much money is on it. My name wasn't even right. It had my wife's last name on it. So I was just like, I was thinking to myself, if I'm making this mistake, there's got to be a lot of, I can't imagine, my
Wait, it
mother,
had
for
your
instance, would
first
be able
name.
to.
It is. Sorry, you
My
had
first
your
name and my
first name and
wife's
your
last
wife's
name.
last name?
Yeah. So look, when you get those credit card applications that are like they look like credit cards, and it says, but it's actually just like a fake piece of plastic that's trying to get you to apply for a credit card. That's exactly what it looked like. So
Yes.
I was shocked by this. So I looked into it a little bit. It's legit. Um, so if you get this thing, I put a link in the newsletter to what it looks like. Don't throw it out. It is your stimulus payment. The IRS doesn't say why some people are getting these debit cards. So it's hard to know like why you would get it, like to know if you're expecting it or not. But just keep it in mind. It's also tricky. You got to activate it in order to transfer it to your bank without fees. You have to call a phone number as opposed to just depositing a check. So I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth here, right? Like this is the definition of free money. But I just want people to be aware, because that would be a major bummer if you tossed out
Um,
a debit card with $1,200 on it, right?
I'm thinking about when you were saying, the credit cards. My dog got a credit card. What that was sent to us. My dog's name is Trestle. So Trestle, with my last name, got a credit card. I'm like, what has Trestle been up to? It was just
Well, it also
this
just begs the
idea of
question, like,
it's
how did that
insanity.
even, like, what database is there in which somebody knows what your dog's name is, right? Like,
I'm guessing
the whole
because we
thing
have
is so
pet
weird.
insurance.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe. But I
Right.
know it was one of those bizarre moments. But anyway, thank you. That it's a good heads up, just
Yeah,
about what these
I was
cards look
shocked.
like. Just some quick business news to get to. It is the end of an era in American business. It will soon be impossible for regular people to buy a product made by General Electric. The 130-year-old company founded by Thomas Edison is getting out of the business that it invented, the light bulb. GE is selling its lighting unit to Savant Systems. It's part of a major restructuring to focus on industrial machines like jet engines and wind turbines. Isn't there something sad about this?
I thought so. I thought it was really. I mean, I love these kinds of stories, just that are just represent these kinds of like moving on of major. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but yeah, it is kind of sad. I mean, General Electric is the light bulb company, um, and now this was their last direct link to consumers, as you put it. You won't really be able to buy a GE thing anymore. They're still like GE appliances still exist, but they're not actually GE. They're just branded. GE sold their appliance business to a Chinese company a few years back. And it'll be the same with the light bulbs. They'll still have the GE name on them, but they won't be made by GE. So yeah, I mean, GE probably the most iconic American company, right? Just in terms of just in terms of history. And when you worked at NBC, were they owned by GE?
Yes.
Yeah, that must have been, because it was when I was there too.
I can't.
Um,
I can't even believe that I'm saying like answering that slowly as if I don't know. Yes, they were at that point.
well, I just remember because it was a big deal. Like you worked for General Electric.
Yeah.
They were this huge conglomerate, and they had a media arm. You had a television network, and they made light bulbs. And they made jet engines. But the times are changing, right? But yeah, pretty remarkable.
All right, Carlo, it's time for some good news. What do you have?
So I love this story that I threw in the newsletter today. The audio doesn't really do it justice because the pictures are really cool, but go check it out. Archaeologists in Italy, they discovered a perfectly preserved mosaic tile floor under this vineyard outside of the city of Verona. For decades, they thought that this ancient Roman villa was buried underground at this site, and the diggers finally got a glimpse of what awaits them if they can successfully excavate the entire area. The pictures are really cool. It literally looks like a perfectly preserved, ornate bathroom tile floor, and it was just like under the dirt. And it's just, I don't know. It just gave me like a good feeling. Like there's just so much, there's so much beauty out there, and yeah, I also just have such a soft spot for these stories. Like there's always these stories like in Rome when they're trying to like extend their subway. And they can't because they're digging and they find like a completely preserved um, uh, archaeological artifact, and they have to like move the entire subway route because of it.
It's
So I
nice to
just
know
thought
we haven't destroyed
was cool,
everything.
right? Yeah, exactly. Right. Thank you. That's a better way to put it.
Okay, so my good news, it's just to bookend this podcast and talk a little bit about this historic SpaceX launch with NASA that's going to happen now, hopefully on Saturday. For people who don't totally care about this, which I get, just some background, a little color about the two astronauts who are going to be on board, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. They are just really interesting, kind of funny guys. So the first NASA astronauts who are going to be on a SpaceX private ship. They are best friends. Each one is married to another astronaut. They each have a son. They go by the nickname the Dads. Doug Hurley, I was looking on his Twitter page. It's, so typical. It's just so funny. He wrote, his bio is Karen, that's his wife. Karen's husband is, how he describes himself, which is just amazing.
Right.
Karen posted, who again is an astronaut herself, where she describes herself as a former astronaut. She posted the most incredible picture on her Twitter page, the view of her son looking down at the spaceship on the launch pad. You actually flagged me to it. She wrote, arriving in Florida with a flyby of your dad's spaceship on the launch pad, ... priceless. This stuff is super cool, and I am just rooting for these guys. I'm so excited to see this happen, and the personal stories of these astronauts. They work for so long, to go into space, and so not all launches get so much publicity, but this one is really historic.
There was a great video yesterday of them, when they thought that the launch was still on, and they were like pantomiming hugging their kids, right? Because they're in the they're in quarantine. But yeah, I mean, imagine both of your parents. Like, imagine being in elementary school and both of your parents are astronauts. Like, what?
You win.
Serious bragging rights. How do you beat that?
These guys have been quarantined, by the way, since March.
Like us.
Pretty much, actually. Okay, let's end it there. Thanks for listening, everyone. That's what you need to know for Thursday, May 28th.
See you tomorrow, guys.